Hello everybody, it's time for another weekly wrap-up. I am just off of Dewey's 24-hour readathon, so my head is abuzz with short fiction rather than the longer works that I read this past week, but we will see if I can get my thoughts in order for this video. I don't have a longer intro than that, so let's just get down to business. First is Her Smoke Rose Up Forever by James Tiptree Jr. This is a collection of classic science fiction stories by somebody who is considered to be a master of the short fiction, science fiction story. James Tiptree Jr., for people who don't know, was actually a woman named Alice Sheldon. She's a very interesting figure and kind of a tragic figure. I'll let you go look her up on Wikipedia if you want to know more, but she successfully passed herself and her writing off as by a man for a decade, and reading this, she nails the masculine style. It's almost over the top masculine, but I can now understand why so many people were utterly convinced she was a man. Now, after reading this, I am not certain myself that I really enjoy Tiptree's version of feminist science fiction. I certainly don't agree with her about all of her portrayals of men, women, gender politics, and sexuality, especially the prevalence of sexual violence and rape in her stories. She really focuses, all of her stories are ultimately about death in some way. One of the best titles of a science fiction story I have ever heard of is in this collection. It's a story called Love is the Plan is Death. And if you just substitute sex for love, that is Tiptree in a nutshell. It all ends in death. I buddy read this collection with Joe from Final Blow Joe, which is a very good experience. Neither of us had buddy read a short story collection before, but honestly I think it lends itself very well to a buddy read and gives you a structure for what you're going to discuss each day. We are going to be talking about more of the individual stories in our next short fiction live show, so I'm not going to get into details here. I would get really bogged down in details if I went any further than that, but this is a really great collection. Even if you don't agree with all of the things that Tiptree is doing in her stories, she's an amazing writer. I mean, at the end of so many stories, that's exactly what Joe and I were saying was, this was weird, but man, she can write. I really hope to learn more about Tiptree in the future because I think she is one of the most fascinating, mysterious, and complex science fiction writers I've ever come across. She almost has this mythos around her, and I need to know more, and I would definitely want to read more of her science fiction. She wrote some novels, but they were not as well received as her short fiction, and this is the place to start with her. So if you want to try Tiptree, find this collection. It is pretty much unanimously agreed upon to be the master collection of almost all of her major, famous, award-winning short stories. Next, I finally read Luna New Moon by MacDonald. I have a couple of friends who have been raving about this book, and Bree from Stories from the Shelf has repeatedly called it Godfather in Space, and wow, it is. I hear that they're making like an HBO or Showtime TV series out of this, and I can see why. It has sex and death and hot Brazilian people and explosions. The casting, if they ever make this show, is gonna have to be amazing because young, rich, hot people on the moon. So Luna New Moon is the first in a duology. The second one, Wolf Moon, is coming out in September, and I'm hoping to get that sooner rather than later. And it is about the Corta family on the moon in 2150. It's about 50 years after the moon has been colonized. There are the dragon families, these four major families, the most influential ones in the colonization and industrialization of the moon. And then there is the Corta family. The Corta family wants to be the fifth dragon, and their matriarch, who has tooth and claw been building up her family, is Adriana Corta. Now, at the beginning of the story, everything seems to be great. The Cortas are poised to become the next dragon family, and then Adriana Corda is dying, and she is trying to arrange the successful succession of her children and grandchildren to take over the family. There are multiple people telling the story. You get some very interesting flashbacks of Adriana Corda's life about how she left Brazil and became one of the first people on the moon to do something big. You get to learn about the squabbles and feuds and outright war that's happened between the families, the major families on the moon before, how that's influencing the present day. There are also points from her children's perspective, from her daughters, her sons, and from the perspective of a woman outside of their family who has come to the moon, and shows you how crazy all of this is. It's a very violent story, because I'm going to tell you there's a cliffhanger at the end where everything is pretty much fallen apart, and seeing how it all happens, I just couldn't stop reading. I was practically holding my breath, and I stayed up late to see how this was all gonna fall apart. And now I want to know how they're all gonna come back, because that's probably the most interesting thing about stories like this, is when something terrible has happened, how do the people that you're rooting for, even if they're not so great people, come back out on top. There are so many things to say about this society on the moon. It's all about corporations and about contract law. It's not really a lawless moon, but the only law they have is contract or like corporate law, which means how you do things and what you can get away with and what is perfectly legal is so different from what people's expectations are when they come from Earth. A thing that I really liked about this is that I don't think it's a dystopia. There are certainly things you learn about the Earth and of course about the difficult situation on the moon that are not pleasant, that don't say very good things about how humans are taking care of or not taking care of our world and the collapse of economies and nations and everything. But the focus really is on this almost claustrophobic situation, this precarious situation on the moon, and what comes after this. Nobody's going back to Earth. As you're repeatedly told, after you've been on the moon for a certain amount of time, you literally cannot go back to Earth because of like bone degeneration or whatever. So when you leave Earth, you leave it. And nobody cares about the Earth when you've been on the moon for that long. I would really recommend this one. It was a wild ride to read it, and I really can't wait until the next book. My leg is falling asleep, so now I'm more crooked than usual. The last thing that I read was the audiobook of The Hidden Reality by Greene. It is about theoretical physics, about parallel worlds, other dimensions, and just generally 9 different ways we have come up with multiverse scenarios. Because I listened to this as an audiobook and because it covers some pretty theoretical advanced physics that I have never really read about before, I can't recap everything that was exactly in this, but it does cover parallel world multiverse ideas like, are we in a computer simulation? Are we in a simulated multiverse? Holographic multiverses, string theory, brain multiverses or whatever. It's just really interesting. I am astonished that scientists and theoreticians and mathematicians have come up with at least 9 different reasons or explanations for why there could be multiverses out there. Apparently it's really common for people to come up with multiple universes or the need for other dimensions in order to solve certain theories. Like apparently string theory only works, the equations for it only work if you have 10 dimensions. If you don't have that many, then it's kind of screwed. So I think I will get a lot more out of this topic if I continue reading books about it. I don't think this is a book to start with if you have never listened to or read a popular science book before, but Greene was really good at explaining things. The way that he uses analogies, the way that he explained things, even for very abstract and mathematical concepts, was very good. I enjoy science and math, and I have read quite a few nonfiction books about physics, so it felt more accessible to me, but really don't start with this. Also, it seems that Greene has other books out there like The Elegant Universe that people recommend you start with first. I didn't know they existed until I'd already read this book, so apparently there are other books by Greene I will be reading in the future. So those are the 3 things that I finished this past week. I thought I did pretty well, also considering I spent an entire day reading 21 short stories for Dewey's 24-hour readathon. That's pretty good. I am still reading A Brief History of Time by Stephen Hawking. I'm a little more than halfway through it now, and I'm enjoying it a bit more than I initially did, but it's still pretty beginner level and repetitive for things that I already know about. And I'm still reading Infomocracy by Malka Older. I don't know how much reading I will get done this next week, but I will be coming back in a couple of days with my review, yay, of To Light the Lightning by Ada Palmer, so look forward to that. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have read any of these books or if you want to read them, please tell me down in comments, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.